And this is Fintan Dunne reporting. Thank you for joining us. Thanks also to our sponsor neemwell.com, your personal source for potent Indian neem. Now, Kathy McMahon formulates a hypoallergenic, genuine Indian neem. It's wildcrafted, it's organic, and you can get more details at Neemwell. Let me spell that for you. It's NEEMWELL.com. And it works better than that pharmaceutical rubbish. It's anti-inflammatory, antihistamine, it's antiviral, antifungal. Just check it out yourself at neemwell.com. Now, we're going to be dealing with the CIA bitches in this episode, and of course they are male and female, but what they have in common, regardless of sex, is that they bitch for the CIA. And that's one of the reasons I don't. Because I'm still here. Because I haven't headed for the hills. And we're still around, and we have every intention of staying around. But before we get into the bitches, let's just review how we got here. In the previous episodes, first episode, 9/11 Without Tinfoil, the coup. That's where we outlined to you the 35-year dictator of the USA, that is, George Bush Sr., and how he got there and what that means. That's the context for 9/11. We explained how Bill Clinton works for George Bush Sr. and how Bush Sr. has been in power since back in the Reagan era. We also developed that theme in episode 2, the deception. Then in episode 3, we moved on to the next level. How do you move on to the next level? By realizing that the 9/11 truth movement, in inverted commas, was part of a psychological operation. That the establishment was not trying to cover up 9/11, but they were using awareness of 9/11 among a minority of people as a psychological operation against everybody, causing the mainstream people to repress their secret worries that the government pulled off 9/11, causing the middle ground to be uncertain and to stay uncertain and feel powerless, and causing the conspiracy theorist group to feel intimidated because of the threat of imminent concentration camps, etc., etc., and also the psychological operation aimed to make them respond emotionally rather than strategically. And I know a lot of people got it really quick when we started to point out that George Bush Sr. has been and is running the United States, running the US end of the G8 New World Order. And how do we know there's a New World Order, by the way? Well, you got to go to the source. You want to find out whether there's a New World Order, you don't have to listen to Alex Jones, you just have to listen to old Henry. Henry who? Henry Kissinger, of course.
The United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
Within the next 4 years, we will see the emergence of a new international order.
The beginning of a new international order.
New international order, new world order, let's not quibble over details. We all know what we're talking about, and George Bush Sr. knew what he was talking about when he first used the term New World Order on assuming the presidency of the United States. And like I say, I know many people get that. Others who are a bit doubtful, maybe their doubts disappeared when they saw George Bush Sr., larger than life, around about, I'd say, 2.5 times the size of George Bush Jr., on the cover of Newsweek in mid-November. And wasn't that a clever bit of psychological operations too? You see, the Newsweek article didn't actually say that George Bush Sr. was taking over the presidency unelected from George Bush Jr. No, it didn't say that. But the photo on the cover left you in no doubt as to who was the big boy who was coming to take charge. And that's why it's a bit facile to talk about, fascist dictatorship takeover. The fascist dictatorship takeover was years ago, dude. This is the aftermath of that takeover we're dealing with, and the outrageous audacity of these individuals to murder thousands of US citizens on home soil in order to further their ends geopolitically and in order to play psychological warfare games on the American people. The other context we're in is, at the surface level, is that we are post George W. Bush's Republican administration neocon ascendancy phase, and we're into the velvet glove Democratic phase. So that's why the CIA bitches have been pushing the issue of George W. Bush so hard, because they figure that if you figure that George Bush Jr. is on the way out, well then you've nothing to worry about. The other advantage, of course, was that this relentless focus on Jr. took your eye off George Bush Sr., stopped people from connecting the dots. But you'd imagine that if George Bush Jr. is on the way out, and if the neocons are on the way out, and if the Democrats are back in power, etc., that those CIA bitches would be redoubling their efforts, at least in public presentation anyhow, will be saying, right, this is our moment. Now we finally have democratic control of Congress and the Senate. Now let's go for it on the 9/11 issue. No. You see, the CIA bitches, they've largely done their job. That's why there was so much talk about the 9/11 issue over the last few years, because they wanted to blast it and blast it and blast it while George Bush Jr. was in power, while the Republicans had control, while the psychological warfare was strong. And now that the Democrats are in control, they want to forget. You see, the idea never was to get the truth on 9/11 out there. The idea always was to absolutely drown you in detail on the 9/11 issue, to hammer relentlessly on the same old topics day after day, week after week, regurgitating, repeating Building 7, World Trade Center at Building 7, Pentagon, to keep hammering away at them until you're almost sick of it. And they were going to do that while they had you in the grip of the psychological warfare, so that you weren't thinking straight. And now that the Democrats are in, there would actually be a real danger that something might be done about 9/11. Well, now they want to forget about it completely. And so the CIA bitches are leaving town. Now, for the last year or so, with nothing really new to say about the 9/11 issue, the CIA bitches have been busy infighting. Allegation after allegation, row after row on the CIA bitches for months. But by, say, late summer of this year, it was getting close, folks. I mean, in another few months, the Democrats will be back in. And so it was that there was a break-in at Mike Ruppert's office. Mike Ruppert from The Wilderness, copvcia.com. If you're not familiar with the guy, he has allegedly blown the whistle on CIA narcotics operations, as if the whistle hadn't been blown anyway. But remember that Mike Ruppert's a guy who can't quite figure out whether he was recruited by the CIA or not. This is available, it's in the public domain. It's from comments at a town hall meeting in South Central LA on the 15th of November 1996, where Mike Ruppert stood up and said the following, and I'm quoting his exact words: "I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s. I'll say that again. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s. I don't know. But anyhow, sometime in the evening of Sunday the 25th of June of 2006, an unknown number of suspects entered the offices of From the Wilderness, Mike Ruppert's office, and broke computers, smashed doors. At least that's what Mike claims. Maybe that just cracked his resolve, because before long Mike was heading out of the United States. He eventually ended up in Caracas, and then on the 18th of November he left Caracas for Canada, where he is now recovering, receiving medical care and attention, by the way. And it's just unfortunate. The website is broke. He owes a lot of money to people, and he won't be running it anymore. He's given up the ghost. He's out of the business. He just can't hack it any longer. Only months to go before a Democratic administration takes over, and Mike Ruppert folds up and leaves town. It's a pattern you'll see repeated a great deal over the months ahead, by the way. And as late as just the other week, Wing TV, stalwart patriot movement defenders of truth, my ass, have also ceased operations. First Lisa Giuliani, she said she was pulling out, and then Victor Thorne a couple of weeks later announced that he also was quitting. He'd had enough. Goodbye, and frankly, good riddance. But the CIA bitch I'd like to focus on, the one who left town, is, and you can't, when you're talking CIA bitches, you can't get better than this one, is Amanda Keller, the alleged reputed girlfriend of Mohammed Atta, at least alleged by her and alleged by Daniel Hopsiker. Just about on the 5th anniversary of 9/11, on September the 10th, 2006, the Florida Herald Tribune reported under the following headline, "It was my bad for lying," by Heather Allen. For 5 years, Amanda Keller has been portrayed by conspiracy theorists as Mohammed Atta's lover, But the former Venice stripper now says her boyfriend was another flight student not connected to 9/11. And for the first time, federal investigators say she's right. There's nothing there to corroborate the relationship between the two, a New York-based counter-terrorism agent said recently after reviewing 9/11 case files. The agent got clearance to talk from the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, but only agreed if his name was not used. Which I think is really cute, by the way, because it lets you get the story out with supposed government backing, but absolutely no traceability on the source. Beautiful. Continuing the article, in 2002, Keller granted an interview with Daniel Hopsiker, a Venice self-published writer who maintains the government has covered up facts about 9/11. In a taped interview that has circled the internet, Keller casually discusses intimate details about her relationship with Mohammed. She claimed it was Atta, but changed her story soon afterwards. Just remember that bit. In a taped interview that circled the internet, Keller casually discusses intimate details about her relationship with Mohammed. She claimed it was Atta, but changed her story soon after. It was my bad for lying, Keller said. I really didn't think about it until after I did it. Keller, 24, is engaged and studying to become a nurse. She moved to Ohio in early 2002 and said she hoped that by getting married and changing her name, she could finally leave the rumours behind. Now, isn't that beautiful? Because Amanda Keller is reportedly engaged and about to get married and change her name, meaning that in order to track her down after she gets married, all we have to do is look for somebody called Amanda something in the United States. This is really cute. Heather Allen wrote this for the Herald Tribune, and it's so beautifully constructed. It's such a beautifully constructed exit for Amanda Keller that I can't help wondering if Heather Allen gets the odd check from Langley. Remember, Amanda's the one to whom we awarded our Best Supporting Actress in a 9/11 Cover-Up Award back on the 16th of August 2005, well over a year ago, because of the role she played in the cover-up of 9/11. Cover-up in a way, because they weren't trying to hide it from you. They were trying to feed you a line of complete and total bullshit. You see, Amanda Keller is a bit of a mystery, really, because on the one hand, there we have the newspaper talking about her being a stripper, and Daniel Hopsiker is referred to her as a fashion model, you know, the kind you rent by the hour. And on the other hand, the sort of frumpy librarian kind of individual that we see in the video interviews of Amanda Keller conducted by Dan Hopsiker, well, it's totally at variance with the kind of wild and wacky picture that comes out of the other portraits. I mean, which is the real Amanda, I wonder? And Amanda's a curious individual. You see, the rest of us, well, we know who Muhammad Atta is. You know, from his photo, we could probably pick him out in seconds in a crowd. But Amanda can't tell him apart from the next guy, even in bed. And now she claims that he wasn't Muhammad Atta at all. In fact, he was maybe some other Muhammad who was at a flight school, at the same flight school or something. Does that make sense? Two Muhammads at the same flight school? I'm not sure. And I'm not sure I buy the librarian shtick, you know. I don't buy it. I think Amanda Keller is hot in bed. And, you know, there's this coy librarian sideways look she gives that gives it away. And that's where Amanda Keller has it. And that's not the kind of thing that comes across from Sibel Edmonds, really. You know, Sibel Edmonds is sort of very cold kind of fish. Whereas Amanda Keller, I reckon if you have to go to bed with a CIA bitch, pick Amanda over Sibel Edmonds any day. And anyway, Edmonds is probably into SM stuff, you know, all that talk of gag orders. Say no more. Seriously though, these two are like a pair of storyboard characters from some Marvel Comics 9/11 special issue. Are we supposed to buy this bullshit?
These guys had money flowing out their ass. I mean, excuse my language, but they never seemed to run out of money. I mean, they was just tossing money left and right. I mean, it was just like, oh my God. And they had mass supplies of cocaine. Whenever they'd run out, they'd go to the flight school.
Massive amounts of cocaine. Oh my God. That's what's so good about Amanda Keller. That's why she gets our Best Supporting Actress in a 9/11 cover-up. Way better an actress than Sibel Edmonds, who's pathetic, to be quite honest. Sorry, Sibel. No, it's the ability to come across as slightly dumb that is so engaging about Amanda Keller. And yet this is a thoroughly professional performance. However, of course, they did have plenty of time to do a lot of takes until she got it right, her and Daniel Hopsiger. Because it wasn't just a performance by Amanda Keller, it's a performance also by Dan Hopsiger. And here he is, apparently stumbling on to a bit of hot information that links Wally Hilliard to the people that Amanda's been seeing at the flight school. It wasn't just Amanda doing the performing here. Here we go.
Because it was funny to see the chubby guy and the little guy walking together, because it looked kind of like Albert out the
Abbott Costello.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's what it kind of looked like.
So Wally's a short guy. Yeah, he is a short guy. He is a short guy. Fuck.
Yeah, he is a short guy. Fuck. Oh yeah, right. That's him. Amanda's telling the truth. Oh my God. Give me a break. Anyhow, you remember in that news story that she was talking about changing her name when she gets married? I mean, does anybody have a real name in all of this? I don't think so. Check out Amanda again, as recorded by Dan Hopsiger.
I was in a session one day. Muhammad and all these people that he was with, they were drunk and stoned out of their freaking minds. I wish I knew some of these girls' real names so I could tell you.
Yeah, let's just hear that again. It's worth listening to twice.
I wish I knew some of these girls' real names so I could tell you.
Yeah. Well, I wish she knew some of those girls' real names so she could tell us as well. I'm sure you do too.
I wish I knew some of these girls' real names so I could tell you.
Because, you know, real names, they go a long way to verifying your credibility. If you know real names. But it's not the only time we have a problem with names. And this stinks, folks. Here we go again.
He come in there screaming his head off. Where's Amanda? I want to see Amanda. And none of these people knew my real name because it was all supposed to be confidential.
None of these people knew my real name because it was all supposed to be confidential. What kind of bullshit is this? I wish I knew some of these girls' real names so I could tell you, and none of these people who were there knew my real name because it was supposed to be confidential. This is a completely unverifiable story that Dan Hopsiger has been pitching at us along with Amanda Keller.
Where's Amanda? I want to see Amanda. And none of these people knew my real name because it was all supposed to be confidential.
Yeah, and now nobody's ever going to know her real name. Nobody's ever going to know her real name ever again when she changes it again. So, folks, this totally stinks. I think you will agree. This whole story that has been put up and that has been pawned off on us by the CIA bitches, the bitch Amanda Keller and the bitch Dan Hopsiger, is complete trash. It's useless. And with Amanda's story in the public domain, on the record, in the news media, saying that she made it all up in the first place, all you've got to do is go to Dan Hopsiger's website and listen to that, and you'll realise that, yeah, she did make it all up. It's all complete and total bullshit. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Dan Hopsiger, and remember his story is very important, it's the first major meet in the 9/11 conspiracy issue, was when we got the story out of Florida from Dan Hopsiger about the girlfriend who said that he had loads of money and cocaine, and that didn't fit the profile of a hijacker, a dedicated fanatical Muslimaniac hijacker, now did it? And so people thought they were onto something. People thought that this was a substantial story that was going to help break open the government story of 9/11. But it wasn't. And we see now, we're looking at ashes is all we've got from the Amanda Keller story. However, those audio interviews with Amanda Keller did bring out something else. You see, Dan Hopsiger doesn't buy that 19 hijackers didn't carry out the 9/11 attacks on their little lonesomes. Dan Hopsiger thinks they did, all on their little onios. Okay. And in order to substantiate that, he needs a picture of Muhammad Atta that's compatible with that. Something that helps explain why a guy who was loaded with money and loaded with coke would be bothering his ass attacking skyscrapers on 9/11. You get it? But those little bits are in there in the Amanda Keller interviews as well. The bits that explain the kind of nut that Muhammad Atta was, or Muhammad, whoever he was. And they include, for example, the fact that he hated the Bible. Here we go.
I was praying, and I was sitting at the table and I was reading my Bible, and he come in and snatched my Bible away from me and tore it in half. He said, "What are you doing?" And I had crosses on my walls, and he broke my crosses.
Okay, poor Amanda there, overcome just with remembering back to how he snatched her Bible and broke her crosses. And it was worse. It got worse. It got much worse. Not only did he hate the Bible and the cross, but he was also apparently a complete and total psycho, which was also going to be very important for Dan Hopsiker's side of the story.
And when I came in from work, my friend Paige was with me, and she helped me pick up little baby cat parts.
6 dead kittens, their heads cut off.
All little body parts everywhere.
When you called the police, did you tell them you thought it was Muhammad that did it?
Isn't that terrible? 6 baby kittens murdered by Muhammad Atta. And I suppose after you've done your first half a dozen baby kittens, then attacking the World Trade Center is easy. So you see, in the story that came out, the picture of Muhammad Atta that Amanda was painting, it contained the elements that let Dan Hopsiker portray this and others who followed on. And we've had some of those others on our website in the forum, by the way, pushing this line that Muhammad Atta was a coke guy, some kind of a drug runner. According to Hopsiker, he was a lieutenant in Osama bin Laden's international drug smuggling empire, and had loads of coke and loads of money. But we also get this other story about him being a psycho who hates the Bible and the crosses, etc., etc., which allows Hopsiker to say, yep, he was a drug lieutenant, but he was also a psycho who hated us or hated our freedoms, or etc. Just the same old Bush line. But some of you might be still clinging to the belief that, Dan Hopsiker was just taken in by Amanda Keller. And I don't think that's supported by the evidence. You see, if you draw the inference, if Amanda Keller is a CIA plant, which she clearly is, then you don't give the job of interviewing the CIA plant to just anybody, because this stuff had to be recorded again and again until Amanda got it right. She and Dan Hopsiker and the CIA film crew sat down and they ran it. Hiya guys, I hope some of you guys are listening in. I like the lighting, very good job on the lighting, and the sound not so good. But sat down and they did this many times until they got it right, and this story was carefully crafted to give the wrong impressions at the right times and then to finally collapse. So Dan Hopsiker's in it. Remember that story I quoted you, the one about Amanda's departure for greener pastures? Remember the sentence I asked you to recall. In a taped interview that has circled the internet, Keller casually discusses intimate details about her relationship with Muhammad. She claimed it was Atta, but changed her story soon after. So the Herald Tribune in their story, which is a CIA story, are saying that it was a Muhammad, and she claimed it was Atta, but changed her story soon afterwards. Suppose I showed you Dan Hopsiker helping to establish that confusion. Would you be so believing that he was simply taken in? Well, I just did. Listen to that last clip again.
6 dead kittens, their heads cut off.
All little body parts everywhere.
When you called the police, did you tell them you thought it was Muhammad that did it?
Did you tell him you thought it was Muhammad Atta?
When you called the police, did you tell them you thought it was Muhammad that did it?
You see, he says, did you tell him you thought it was Muhammad Atta that did it? That's what he was about to say. Did you tell him you thought it was Muhammad Atta that did it? Now, we're talking about Muhammad Atta here. Keller says it's Muhammad Atta. This is the whole reason he's there, is that she's allegedly Muhammad Atta's girlfriend, and that Muhammad Atta lived with her, and he's been on the scene, and he knows where they lived, and he's done video segments outside her house where she lived with Muhammad Atta. Everybody knows it's Muhammad Atta we're talking about. And yet, Hopsiker goes to the trouble of stopping and correcting himself from saying Muhammad Atta, and instead backtracking it to being Muhammad. Isn't that funny?
When you called the police, did you tell them you thought it was Muhammad that did it?
So Hopsiker, in his own interview there, is supporting the line which subsequently gets picked up and repeated by the Herald Tribune, that it was Muhammad, but that it was some other Muhammad. No, Dan Hopsiker's as dirty as they come. He's another CIA bitch, and that's why I'm focusing on this issue, this story, because all this has implications. If the CIA were waiting for you with Amanda Keller and Dan Hopsiger down in Florida, ready to feed you a load of diversionary bullshit. It means they were waiting for you all the way along, waiting for those who had suspicions, tapping and trapping those suspicions, diverting them, psyoping them, turning them into emotional reactions, etc., etc. But hey, we've only scratched the surface of the bitches. There's plenty more of them. After all, we named 108 websites, so that involves a lot of personnel, and we'll get to that after we take a little music. If you hear me going around going, well, you'll understand why I'm doing that, because it means that I've been exposed to the most addictive bass line in rock, and it comes from these guys, Gold Rush, and it's Wait for the Wheels. You see, that's what I've been doing, just waiting for the wheels to turn round. As we predicted, we're well and truly finished with phase 1 of the 9/11 cover-up. A lot of the bitches are going to be out of the picture, and a lot of people who were easily fooled are going to be out of the picture. And the 9/11 issue is going to be in the hands of dedicated individuals who want the truth to come out and aren't dumb. And that means that we're actually going to be able to get somewhere. But I'll shut up now, because otherwise I'm going to interfere with the build-up to this baseline. Gold Rush, Wait for the Wheels. You're on the next level on breakfornews.com, and we'll be right back. And you're very welcome back. You're on the next level on breakfornews.com, and this is 9/11 without tinfoil. Now, as I said, that was a double act between Amanda Keller and Dan Hopsiger down in Florida, and that story helped establish the idea of Muhammad Atta the Psycho, which Hopsiger then took to the alternative media. And that's the thing about the CIA bitches, they all promote each other on each other's websites, etc., etc. And it wasn't long before Dan Hopsiger was on Wing TV. And yes, here he is now, using the material supplied to him by his colleague Amanda Keller, or Amanda whoever, or if her name is Amanda.
Somebody asked me, couldn't believe Muhammad Atta had flown the plane. Well, it had to have been, remote controlled. Well, I said to him, every time somebody blows themselves up in a car bomb in the Middle East, you say the same thing? Do you say, that suicide bomber was duped into doing it? No,
but
you don't do that.
There's no huge inconsistencies. There's so many holes in the government.
No. There are plenty of holes, but the idea that Muhammad Atta did not willingly go to his death by flying an airliner into a skyscraper is that's what happened.
Okay, that's from a Wing TV show. That's Victor Thorne, Dan Hopsiger and Lisa Giuliani pretending to be having an argument with each other about the 9/11 issue. This is what the CIA bitches do, is they have these fake arguments. And so if you hear them dissing each other, you'll notice that a lot of the time they're doing it like live on air. So you've got these people who are fundamentally, vehemently opposed to each other, and yet they somehow manage to be on each other's shows all the time, live on air, dissing each other. So don't buy into the fake arguments. Here's Dan Hopsiger, he's on Wing TV, and he's using that material which he and Amanda Keller have put together in their videos. He's using it to establish the nature of Muhammad Atta. Here we go.
I came down here and discovered there was a Muhammad Atta. I discovered he is a psychopath. I discovered he hated us. These are facts now. I have proved them.
Right, okay.
Yeah, well, not right and not okay, because with Amanda Keller's recanting her story, Dan Hopsiger's proved nothing, has he? But it served its purpose at the time, and the main purpose was for Dan Hopsiger to put this line out about 9/11. And as I say, don't buy the fake arguments, despite the fact that Lisa Giuliani and Victor Thorne are supposedly confronting Dan Hopsiger. It's Giuliani who feeds him the perfect line for the main point that Dan Hopsiger wants to make.
You've touched on what is the big story of 9/11, which is that Muhammad Atta would not have been in this country if he hadn't been a drug lieutenant in Osama bin Laden's worldwide Islamic drug cartel, which was doing business with someone in a position of authority in our government.
Well,
do you think that arms for drugs deals are being covered up by the events of 9/11, the prevarication and the suppression of evidence and the silencing of witnesses? Does it all lead back to drug deals?
What does Sybil Edmonds, someone who comes at the story of 9/11 from a completely different perspective, and knows things I've never even heard about, is an FBI translator named Sybil Edmonds, who says the State Department is protecting a drug trafficking network associated with 9/11.
And that's the spin. And that idea that 9/11 was essentially some kind of a drug war between bin Laden and the Bush family is central to Dan Hopsicker's diversionary tactics. By the way, I don't know if you noticed that well from Victor, which was quickly interrupted by Lisa Giuliani. You see, Lisa Giuliani's the real operator in, and always has been, in Wing TV. If you're listening to this on the homepage or in the archive of breakfornews.com, just click on the photo that goes with this audio and you'll get to the post in the forum in the 9/11 3i audios section, where I'll have a link to that interview on Wing TV, the Dan Hopsicker interview, and you can check at exactly 12 minutes and 17 seconds into that interview where Victor Thorne's about to say something and Lisa Giuliani gives him virtually an elbow in the ribs to shut the fuck up, because she's about to hand Dan Hopsicker his line, which is his opportunity to come in with the drug trade angle. And just check it out yourself, 12 minutes 18 seconds into that video, and you'll see what I mean about these interviews and many of the appearances of the CIA bitches on each other's shows being totally staged. You'll see what I mean. Now, here it is again in audio, but you really have got to check out the actual video just to see it in its full glory. That shove in the ribs from Lisa Giuliani, because it's reached an important point in the interview and it's time for her to feed Dan Hopsicker the line he needs to take it on into the drug trade. Here it goes again.
Business with someone in a position of authority in our government.
Well,
Do you think that arms for drugs deals are being covered up by the events of 9/11?
But Hopsicker mentions Sibel Edmonds there, and that's our intro to the next CIA bitch in line. And Sibel Edmonds was under a gag order, so she couldn't tell the whole story, and therefore only a certain amount of it could come out. A certain amount, I'm using the right word there, a certain amount could come out, because that's the kind of words Sibel used.
Certain investigations were being quashed, let's say, per State Department's request, because it would have affected certain foreign relations, or it would have affected certain business relations with certain foreign organizations.
Wow, it would have affected certain foreign relations, or certain business relations with certain foreign organizations. Thanks for being so specific, Sibel. But then, hey, that's the gag order. Sibel Edmonds, besides confirming, in inverted commas, Dan Hopsicker's drugs angle to 9/11, she's also smokescreening, taking people's suspicions about some kind of well-organised military-industrial complex cartel that might have been behind 9/11, well connected into government circles, and spreading the blame, well, God knows where. It's hard to make out, isn't it? Here she is again, and this is in an interview I did with Sibel. I was the first person to interview Sibel on air, on audio. I take that as a great honour. But boy, did that ever backfire on them. But they threw Sibel my way, figuring that if they could launch the story through somebody who was a real alternative reporter, then it would add extra credibility to it. Unfortunately, as I say, that did slightly backfire when I outed Sibel and a host of other CIA fakes. But there you go. It was a good idea, guys. Here she is.
This whole game has changed. It really doesn't boil down to countries anymore, because when you have issues involving or activities involving a lot of money, you have nations, people from different nations involved. And as I said before, not necessarily governmental.
Extra-governmental.
Correct. Organized crime. It can be categorized under organized crime.
Okay, so it's organised crime behind 9/11, or maybe they aren't, maybe they're just associated with it. Maybe these guys were smuggling drugs in their spare time and carrying out attacks on the World Trade Center as sort of the day job. See, the whole thing is designed to confuse the issue, to divert, to confuse, to smokescreen, and also to fill the airwaves with a load of drivel in order to take up airspace. Make sure that the likes of breakfornews.com don't get traction. Make sure that there isn't a vacuum there which dedicated individuals would fill if there was no investigation going on whatsoever. If Dan Hopsicker wasn't on the scene, if Sibel Edmonds wasn't on the scene, who knows what legitimate investigators would begin digging around, and who knows what they'd find. And they would get a following. And before you knew it, you might be in trouble. You might have a real 9/11 movement. But maybe you're thinking, hey, Dan Hopsiker and Amanda Keller, yeah, okay, right, I can see it's a fake. But Sibel Edmonds, she's the real deal. Yeah? Well, Sibel Edmonds has Mark Zaid as her lawyer, and her cases have been overseen by Reggie Walton as the presiding judge. You see, Reggie Walton's also sitting on the Libby case, and Reggie Walton's also the presiding judge in the Stephen Hatfield case in relation to the anthrax issue. And Mark Zaid is representing Tony Schaefer, that's the Pentagon Mohammed Atta surveillance crew story, and Patrick Fitzgerald, of course, also prosecuted Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman back in '93 for the World Trade Center bombing. So it's the same cast of characters, and the reason Sibel Edmonds was in there is she may not be a great actress, but hey, she looks good, she has the right kind of upper crust aura about her, and she's a professional CIA agent, and she's perfect for the case. And you can get all that and more about that in part 2 of The Rat's Nest of 9/11, which was out on the 14th of February 2006, and you can Google that, Rat's Nest of 9/11 part 2, Scooter, Reggie and the Birds of a Feather. Birds of a feather, what do? They stick together. So I wonder how long Sibel will stick around. Well, you see, it doesn't matter too much because, hey, the Democrats are in, and the neocons are on the run, and therefore they can quietly fold. But I wonder, will this guy fade away? Remember when we did out these people? Oh, so long ago now, and we've been waiting for the wheels to turn. We told you they would be scaling down. We told you they would be fading off the scene in due course, and here they are doing that. We told you they would be arguing with each other in order to split the 9/11 movement, and we told you they would be discrediting themselves, actively participating in discrediting themselves. So I suppose this guy's going to hang around a bit longer, well in advance of the election. He was busy discrediting himself.
We're talking about the total end of America, total martial law. I've got to calm down. Hold on. We've got to put this in a nutshell. I'm just so upset and so angry about this right now. There's going to be all these sick neocon followers who are going to be happy when hundreds of thousands die, tens of thousands die. It's going to be dark, folks. It's going to be bad. I am predicting you will have huge terrorist attacks in the Western world by, at the latest, late October. I want you to get mad out there, people. I want you to get angry. I want you to get focused. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is what we have laying out before us.
Yeah. And of course it never happened. But you notice that bit that he wants you to get mad, angry, and then focused. Hold on. Focused is not what you get when you get mad. Focused is the last thing you get when you get mad. When you get mad, you get emotional and you start responding to knee-jerk provocation. So this goes back to our central idea that the 9/11 CIA bitches, CIA fakes, were in many cases provoking emotional reactions. So the whole objective was to provoke emotional reactions, and no better man than AJ himself for doing that. But as I say, participating actively in discrediting himself prior to the election. And the purpose of it, just to make absolutely clear you're getting the idea here, the purpose of that is to drive away listeners, to lead them up the garden path and then let them down, because they're trying to get rid of listeners now, because there will be more and more arguments and there will be poorer and poorer coverage of the issues, etc., and they just want to get rid of listeners, and they have the demographics of interest based on the switch around now with the Democrats being in. They have those demographics in their favour. They will and have already shed huge numbers of listeners. They want the 9/11 issue dead. The whole idea was to focus heavy right up until the Democrats take over, start pulling the CIA fakes out just before the Dems come in, lower the tone, lower the standards, drive away the listeners and bury the goddamn issue because they don't want it around anymore with a Democratic administration in place. It's too dangerous. That's always the way it was going to be, folks. And it's okay. It's all right. Because there was always going to be individuals who were involved in the 9/11 issue because they were anti-Bush, and they'd conflated George Bush Jr. and 9/11 as if the two went hand in hand. Remember all that Bush-Cheney stuff, which was always designed to focus you on those guys, and once those guys are on the way out or gone, then you're not going to care anymore. But I don't know if they'll be successful in the long run. I don't think so. I think there will remain, as in the case of the Kennedy issue, a hard core of individuals who are determined to uncover the truth. But I'd like to say that I'm not following any script on this. So I think there is an extent to which they would like to play the 9/11 issue as a JFK script, where the truth on JFK never really comes out in the end, and many years later there are people who suspect, and there are those who still believe, that it was Oswald, etc., and that process took years. I don't know how long this is going to take. Who knows? Who cares? Let it take as long as it needs to take, as long as there are people who are determined to make sure that the real truth of what has been going on does come out. As long as there are people who want to make sure that the legacy of history is not a load of fucking bullshit spun by a load of CIA fakes. That is what we have to avoid. That would be a complete and total disaster. And so that's why we're continuing this work. That's why I hope you will continue this work. And a lot of people put a lot of effort in prior to the election in the 9/11 3i investigation. And it's terrific that we have made such a very good and very strong start in the investigation. And that's something that we can now continue, and we can develop, and we can come at it slowly, methodically, surely, piece by piece, putting together the picture. And I'll be coming back in upcoming audios to the issues of the day and to ideas as to how the operation actually went down. And we also have to continue to broaden our investigation and to present in the end an overview of what has been going on, which is convincing to the average person. I'd like to thank those of you who have participated in the investigation so far. Spread the word about what we're doing in the 3i investigation on breakfornews.com. We're not going anywhere. We're here for the long haul, folks. I hope you are too. And I will be back soon with another 9/11 without tinfoil. But in the meantime, for breakfornews.com, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.